Okay, so this is our final one of our final part of our sequence focusing on research informed. You've distracted me, Jenna.
Sorry.
It
Brilliant image though.
is.
I want
And probably really bad. Okay, this is the final session in our introductory section on research informed practice. Next week, we're going to be starting talking about online tutoring. I do not intend for it to be the end of our talk about research informed. I intend for this to trickle through into everything else that we talk about together. Because if we don't know what the evidence says, we're just stabbing in the dark. And we are not learning styles, smartboard kind of tutors, are we? No, we're not. We are research informed tutors who start, stop, and continue things based on measuring impact. There will be a strong focus on measuring impact as we move forward. But I was mindful that we have only just scratched the surface with one of the most important interventions that we know works and that's particularly powerful in tutoring. Begins with an F. It's the F word.
feedback.
So I thought what we would do, and Georgina, you weren't here on Thursday, so that's super. We're going to be continuing with Jenny. You weren't here either, were you? Sorry. Anybody in here was in our Thursday session? Fantastic. And you won't know that I'm repeating myself slightly. Okay, but that's fine because I want to move further in it as well. So, What Works is written by Lee Elliott Major and his colleague Steve Higgins. Lee Elliott Major is currently Professor of Social Mobility at Exeter. His TED Talk's very good. Before that, he was chief at the Education Endowment Foundation, which creates the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. If you people continue to distract me with the chat, we're going to have a, I'm going to switch off. So what works is a book of the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. Now, we know that the Teaching and Learning Toolkit is measuring impact and evidence and cost for every type of intervention that a head teacher could choose to put into schools to support students with pupil premium funding. That's the structure of the Teaching and Learning Toolkit. That's what gives purpose to the research that they've done. But really, we can use that research to inform everything that we do with our young people. So, the reason why this book is nice and in a certain way nicer than the Teaching and Learning Toolkit is because it's really practical and it has far more guidance in it. So what I want to do is dive directly into the the effective feedback for learning section, and we will discuss some of it together. I will try to give you a heads up before I call on you, Jenna. I will try to give you a heads up before I'm just messing with you. I will try to give you a heads up before I call on you. And I have a sense of where we're going and where we're stopping, but you never know what's going to happen, right? So we know from looking at the Teaching and Learning Toolkit on the Education Endowment Foundation that effective feedback for learning is worth 8 months of attainment. It is cheap to deliver, much cheaper than, say, repeating a year or investing in art therapy. And it is immensely effective when done right. That's what we're going to learn about today, when done right. So, learning benefits, it boosts the confidence of pupils and their belief that they can succeed. Pupils must overcome perceived threats to take leaps in learning. So, hold on to that idea of threat, because that, of course, is what unhelpful feedback looks like. Builds a climate of trust in the classroom or tutoring context through which greater challenge can be provided. Unexpected finding, feedback can make things worse. Beginning to have some inklings on what kind of feedback makes things worse and what kind of feedback creates trustful context. Georgina, I'm mindful that you said before, oh, sweet, I don't like to interrupt them when they're having a go, right? And James has said he likes to give feedback with a we, so that we're sort of focusing on what we're doing together. I know that Jenna's approach to feedback is very holistic, and I don't yet have a handle on what MJ is going to be sharing with us. So let's find out in a second. Teaching tips. Tell learners when they are right and why. which we know is Dee's big thing. So describing what she liked more than when they are wrong. So feedback is not telling them when they're wrong. Feedback is everything you're telling them and showing them with your body language. Show learners where they've improved. Nice. So we're working on their metacognition here. We're working on their ability to reflect on their own work. Praise selectively. We're going to come back to praise in a second. Use digital feedback where appropriate. Provide feedback for challenging tasks. Develop peer feedback, which we've discussed. If you are working in groups, you really want to leverage the power of the collective. Leadership tips. Focus on feedback received. Not, oh, don't worry about that. Okay, fine. Now there's two principles that he shares: the Bananarama and the Goldilocks. Anybody remember Bananarama's song? It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Okay, now you're gonna have that in your head all day. So he talks about it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it in the context of feedback. The Goldilocks principle is, of course, to do it not too much and not too little, but just right. So those are the two things that he's focusing on here. So I just wanted to share with you before I dive into those learning benefits. It says, and Helen Osman was really touched by this phrase, feedback is an emotional and cognitive process. Students may face, MJ, I'm coming to you in just a second. Students may face threats to their well-being when considering leaps in learning, the fear of losing face in front of their peers or the fear of getting a question wrong. Pupils will take one of two roads: the growth pathway to make learning gains or the well-being pathway to avoid threats. Learning gaps must therefore be large enough to extend learners, but not so big that they're set up to fail. Pupils will make more effort if they believe ability is malleable rather than fixed, and if they're oriented towards mastery or self-improvement rather than performance or how well they do compared with their peers. So, the phrase here is feedback shouldn't threaten pupils' belief in their ability to learn. MJ, I know that creating safe learning environments is really, really a strong value for you. So can you talk to us about how you create, how you deliver effective feedback in a safe environment?
Most of my tuition is online. I do some face-to-face, but I'll question, what could you do? What do you think? A safe environment. Obviously, you do risk assessments if it's face-to-face, and also they just generally go through it. But yeah, I ask the student what they think, and then what could you do?
And how do they respond to those questions? Because I know that my kids find those questions challenging.
Yeah, I think initially when I set up a relationship with them is I make it very clear that it's all about them. I don't go to the extent of saying, you know, I'm your psychologist for the hour, but I make it all about them, what they want. So I've set that parameter, and if I can pick, there's one of my students doesn't like asking, and the online tuition is actually quite difficult. So in that situation, because it was close enough, I took some time out to go and visit him face to face, but you can't do that with everybody. So I don't really know what you want more than.
No, you're absolutely doing brilliantly. And for me, it was all about the way you phrase those questions. I think the what do you thinks can work really well, because then you put it right back in their hands. Georgina, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the not being a psychologist.
Yeah.
They have emotions. You don't have to focus on their emotions.
I do say that sometimes, depends on the student. When we've developed a relationship that we can laugh,
Yeah.
then I'll say that. But yeah.
No, you don't have to outright say it, but yeah, I like that idea. I do feel a bit better from you having read that. I remember last time I was saying that I feel like I'm too soft to give constructive feedback, but that kind of affirms some of the ways that I do give the feedback, because I would start with even if they've given me the wrong answer, I won't say this is wrong. I'll start with, I like this in your answer, you've done this well, and then I would have a look at this bit next. How could you improve this? And because unfortunately a lot of the tuition I do is focused on exam performance, I would relate it to what an examiner would be looking for. So this is why this question suggests it needs this answer. Understand, because I think they appreciate a bit of empathy about the fact that in science exams, and more so as you get towards the A levels and onwards, that you have to be so specific to get your marks. It's really frustrating. So to acknowledge this is really frustrating, but this is how we can do that is quite helpful.
Yeah, we heard excuse me, we heard Margaret Mary say that on Thursday, that sometimes she really points to the examiner and says, this is what the examiner wants, and that becomes really neutral.
Yeah,
not about what you did. Yeah, you do that as well, MJ.
I use it a lot in we do the exam papers or topic questions, and I always use the mark scheme, so that I use a bit paper, right. And so there it is. You know, it's not, they're not wrong. They're, but it's what the examiner wants. And
I love
exam questions are stupid, and then you can say,
I don't know what you mean.
Then you can say, look, it's a stupid question, but you know, you can get your marks, and here's where you can get your marks, and look at how many there were. Don't write a sentence on a 1 mark question. That's a minor example.
So that's, hold on a second. So we spoke a couple of weeks ago about neutral feedback, and I think that using the mark scheme is a useful way to sort of create that neutral feedback loop where, exactly like you're saying, it's a 1 mark answer and you've written 4 sentences. Doesn't make any sense, right? So there's something about, in the same way that it says over here that you can use technology, you know, like an app will ping when you got it wrong, or an alarm will buzz when your time's up. Those sort of, they're not between me and you. It's just the format. It's just the tech. It's just the document that's giving you the feedback. Becomes quite useful, I think, except that there's also that element of feedback that's delivered with relationship is also extremely powerful. Jenna, where are you?
All of it.
Okay, great. James.
I think that there's elements of all of that like I pick up on, and I think it's about that relational approach. Whatever you do, it's going to be so dependent on that young person in that moment. It's going to be dependent on what the context of what you're doing is. But I do think that it's that collaborative approach. And I mean, one of the things that I love about some of the feedback I've gotten from my students over, particularly this past academic year, is I'm someone who questions. I like just having a conversation. I like it being collaborative, even if, and this is the best bit, it feels like a conversation. But I'm taking that interrogative approach, and I use the word interrogative in the technical sense.
Well, yeah, it's like the Socratic method. It's the back and forth.
It's more than that.
Okay.
And I literally actually went and found all of the research behind the technical jargon for the different types of questioning that I do, because it's so much further than just the Socratic method. And there's so much more that can fit into different approaches, that is that questioning, natural human curiosity. And I think that one of the things I love about it is that because I'm naturally curious, I want to know the answers, and we find out answers together using things like the mark scheme, using Google, like the amount of time I spend on Wikipedia, and we talk through why we use and don't use Wikipedia, and we look at the sources, and we do all these things. It's that metacognitive approach. It's no matter the age, you can always do metacognition age appropriate, learning how your brain works. Why are you approaching it in this way? What does your brain need to trigger recall? What does your brain need to understand what the heck that exam question is actually asking you for, and making it into like a collaborative little game. And by the end of it, students have been known to be howling, screaming with laughter, locking themselves back in their closets, and and parents storming up the stairs going, oh my God, who's bleeding? Because all of a sudden this child is having a really, really detailed linguistics lesson with full-on etymology back to Old English, and they haven't realised, and all of a sudden it clicks for them that we've just done this massive lesson that's a like degree level English lesson.
I
And
gotcha, because it was so natural, it just flowed, and they were so engaged. So, but this is what occurred to me. You could see that something happened in my brain as you were talking, right?
Yeah.
So I've been thinking recently about convergent and divergent thinking. Actually, it's the other way around. So convergent thinking is the creative blair. No, the other way around. Divergent thinking is a creative blair where you generate tons of ideas. My brain does that very happily all day long. Convergent thinking is where your brain has to then narrow things down to choose which of those many ideas you're actually going to do, because you don't need to make 16 dinners, you need to make one. So first you've got the collection of great big ideas, and then you've got the process of narrowing it down. And Jenna, what occurred to me was that curiosity is part of the convergent thinking, but feedback is actually, sorry, divergent thinking, but feedback is actually where you start narrowing it down. Because even by telling you with my curious voice on, yes, keep going in that direction, that's actually feedback that is guiding.
Exactly.
It starts getting convergent. It starts, so you had that idea of where you were going with the etymology lesson in your brain. They didn't know that. They just had this, you were doing this to them, weren't you? Yeah. So you were sort of like shepherding them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, what I love about what you described there was that it was a different mode of feedback, because we tend to think in the tutoring context of the mark scheme, like MJ was describing, or the I like what you did there that Georgina was describing, but you're actually describing guiding their thinking using your feedback. And that's really, you know, it's lovely to see all those different elements. James, I know that there's a great big splurge of ideas on the table here. Where are you right now?
Well, when I'm giving feedback specifically in maths, sometimes a student can answer and I can see sort of where they're coming from. So I tell them I can see where you're coming from. Because with maths, if you miss one thing at the start, it can sort of lead you to the wrong answer. And often students can be like that. So I'm like, I can see where you're coming from. Or when a student gets the right answer, I say, that's brilliant. Can you show me how you got that answer, or tell me how you got that answer? Just to encourage. But if they don't get it right, sort of like, well, not quite there, and sort of nudge them the right way.
There's something really beautiful in that first piece of I know where you were coming from there, because there's the empathy, right? And also a little bit of mind reading. Do you know what I mean? That really good tutoring looks like mind reading. It means I knew where you were coming from, and I saw how you ended up with the wrong answer, and I know where to dial you back to redirect you to the correct answer. Georgina, do you feel like you do mind reading in your tutoring? Do your students feel like you do?
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, you have to. This is, as James was describing, I remember, but mostly in maths lessons, that you have to be working out the correct answer and however many different methods to get there, and then the ways that could go wrong and what answers that would lead to whilst the student's working that question out, so that when they give their answer, I'm not sitting there going because they immediately think I've got that wrong. And you can see, like, some of it is like straightforward. Like if you write out your method, which I will do regardless of how easy the question is, I can quickly see where they've gone. But yeah, it does mean there's a fair amount of work for me to do, even if it's a simple question, to have the 10 different tangents that this student could go on that one question.
That's right. And it's worth sharing with you because we weren't in this conversation together on Thursday, that he breaks down in this book, which really is worth your time if you're able to, the 6 dimensions of pedagogy. And the first section is pedagogical content knowledge, and that ability to break the process down so that you know all the places they could go wrong, that's where that sits, and it's foundational. You can't do anything if you don't have that. But let me take you somewhere else now. You're going to love this. I've highlighted this many times over. So where he talks about the Bananarama principle, anyone want to sing it for me? Go on. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. Okay, so he says, pupils progress faster when they are told how they've got it right rather than how they've got it wrong.
Yay.
Strengths-based approach is always proven to have more of a success rate and more confidence.
I'm going to tell you more. Teachers need to look for the impact of feedback on pupils' behaviour. How has it been received and understood? Focus on quality, not quantity of marking. Remember that feedback can come from peers as well as adults. Praising, rewarding, or punishing pupils, meanwhile, has little effect. These comments or actions contain little information on how to move the learner forward to his or her goal. Goals should be specific and challenging, but tasks simple. Goals should be specific and challenging, but tasks simple. The aim should be to progress from basic task or personal feedback to higher levels of feedback relating to learning strategies and how pupils self-regulate their own learning. Avoid personal feedback such as, "What a clever girl," as it provides no information for moving learning on. Praise should be directed to increasing pupils' efforts to understand a problem. "You're really great because you have completed this task by applying this concept." For more complex tasks, feedback can be delayed, but for simple tasks, it should be immediate. Come on, Georgina.
That makes me happy.
Go
I
on.
feel even better about why this is what you've done well. I do find, so there's one student that I will say to her quite frequently, "You're really clever, you have a magnificent brain," because she's always telling me, "My brain is weird, it's driving me mad." I'm like, "No, your brain's pretty awesome." It's doing these things really well that most people can't do. And I don't think that they would necessarily have the perspective to see that. But other people who are maybe less inclined to do the work because they feel like they can just wing it, I would never tell them you're really
Right.
because they don't need that. They need, you can do it, but you do need to practice. Like, you're not just going to magically absorb knowledge. You do need to practice and actually study and do exam papers and things like that. Like, it can be helpful and it can be harmful. I think you have to actually understand your student to know what sort of feedback is going to motivate them and what sort of feedback.
Aha. Interesting. So the better you know them, the more effective your feedback will be because you know what they need.
Yeah,
you know what will land with them.
The same thing could be really unhelpful for one student and really helpful for another. So I certainly do say things and think, well, that didn't help me, I won't say that again. I'm going to have to undo that quite a lot.
And Jay, what does that look like in your tutoring context?
Give me the last sentence again.
Well, I'll actually give you the first sentence. Pupils progress faster when they're told how they've got it right.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than how they've got it wrong. What are your thoughts?
No, it's positive reinforcement. If it's negative, and I have been guilty of that with one student actually recently, that just reinforces. They'll remember a negative comment is remembered 10 times. And it can only be equaled out by one negative has to have 10 positives to equal it out.
I try to remind my husband that all the time.
So that doesn't help always when you're very blunt like we are. Anyway,
no, don't go anyway. Hold on, come back. You said right at the beginning there, you said, but there's one student that maybe I've been guilty of that recently.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, were you frustrated with that student? Was there something going on that caused your energy to be depleted and that's why it came out unnecessarily negative, possibly?
Yeah, definitely. This was for an 11 plus, not in Kent, but somewhere else. And it's a long story. I ended up tutoring her, and her maths is really bad. So she can't add up, tens and quick see how you can do simple mathematics easily. And her mother is insistent that I tutored her twice a week, in fact, and she just wasn't doing anything. She was quite lazy, to be honest, and I was getting frustrated, and I know she's not going to pass. And I've alluded this to her mother. I've not said it to the student, but yeah, I was getting frustrated with it.
I really hear that, and I hear how it wasn't a student that you'd usually have, and the mother persuaded you to take it on, and it was twice a week, so that was quite tempting. But the child wasn't likely to pass because she was coming in with a level of maths that's too low. So you're already on the back foot, aren't you?
Yeah.
And for me, the minute that, you know, that word lazy is for me really, really triggering. And I would be really, really careful about when you hear yourself thinking that about a child, there's something to pay attention to there. Something's off in the alignment. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, I didn't use that. So I have to her, but I did to her mother because I'm open and honest with it. But it was frustrating that she still kept going on, you know, and that was all through the summer holidays. And I said she's not doing what she should be doing. And I do think there's an element of laziness there, because with the 11 plus, I don't know if anyone else, but within Kent, for example, these kids are motivating themselves. Those are the types of kids that pass those tests.
Right.
And this kid wasn't motivated. Right. She was being told that's what you're going to do from her parents, and I was delivering it.
So possibly sort of unmotivated might be a gentler phrase, or a less loaded phrase than lazy.
Yeah.
Still delivering the same message, which is she might not be in the category of kids that are suitable for this school.
Yeah, well, I've been around the houses quite a lot with what, you know, sort of managing expectations.
Yes. And then managing your own expectations as well, because you're taking money for a job that you don't feel is you're going to reach the goal, which is, of course, what we've been talking about here. It's all about moving the child forward.
No, I mean, I don't know whether I should have stopped, but no, she just begged me to carry on, and she wasn't doing anything in between.
Yeah.
So it was very frustrating.
That's a very, very difficult setup. I'm really glad we explored that. Thanks for being honest. Jenna, where are you up to?
I have like a million thoughts. Like, I find it, one of the things that sparked for me is that the way we're talking about this feedback side of things, it triggers something for me that really has always irked me about the way that we talk about what kind of feedback. Like, we always say give constructive feedback, but we always
did you hear me use that word?
I don't think we did.
No, I don't think you did.
But it's like, I think that's exactly why it makes me go grr.
Yeah.
Because like, constructive feedback always, like, we always talk about it in terms of that EBI WWW, for those that are familiar with that marking approach in schools. WWW, what went well, even better if. And like, yeah. And I'm like, why, like, constructive
What's that?
That is that approach isn't collaborative. It isn't something that it just makes you go, like, especially like.
Sorry, Jenna, I'm so sorry. I just need to explain the reason why I made that gesture, and I'm sorry, MJ, if it offended you.
No, it didn't. That's the whole thing.
Oh, you agreed with me, yeah.
But then I was interrupting, so I shut up.
Okay, thank you. Anything that's too contrived, Jenna doesn't mind. Anything that's too contrived in the idea of feedback is actually stepping between you and the child. It's only because a tutor doesn't need anything contrived in feedback. They just need to be clued in.
And it's like that. It's like the same thing that gives me the ick about exams is that over prescription of this is the perfect way of doing this, and it's like deficit based, and it's like really trying to trip people up, and like you're creating this perpetuating horrific experience of society and what you expect from people to constantly feel like the examiners, your teachers, all these worksheets, all this stuff. Even when you're in it takes me the majority of like a huge part of my work with any young person is unlearning. When I'm asking you a question, I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm not trying to make you second guess yourself. When I say you've done something well, that's not me gonna drop another shoe and say, and take that like sense of achievement and positivity away from you. Like, I'm going to celebrate with you. I'm going to be curious with you. We're going to go on this journey together, and we're going to unlearn as best we can that constant feeling of every single question, every single interaction is trying to trip you up. Like, and I feel like the other kind of thought that kept coming up with me is this approach also works with like one of the things that people often say to me is, oh, I cannot get this kid to do homework. I cannot get this kid to prove that they're motivated to me. I can't get this kid to prove that they're interested and actually want to do this. And I'm like, okay, but have you taught them? Like, I was that kid who I got an A star in my maths GCSE, having never covered about a third of the content ever because I stopped turning up to lessons. And I
cannot get this child to turn up for lessons, right?
Exactly.
Irrelevant.
Yeah. And it's like, one of the things that I nearly got expelled for was because I wouldn't turn up to lessons and I'd still do well. And teachers would get so angry at me saying,
because they thought the goal was to show up for lessons.
Yeah. And I would not do my homework. I didn't, and people would assume that, oh, you can do it. You don't need to be taught how to learn. You don't need to be taught how to study. You don't need to be taught how to manage your homework and your workload. You can just do it. And for me, that is
a different fact. Those are different skills.
Exactly. And I think that we don't communicate, or we don't realize that it hasn't been communicated what we're looking for when we say that we don't feel you're motivated. You're not showing me that you're interested. You're not showing me that you care about this. They don't, like, we don't tell kids what that means. What are we looking for?
Okay, so hold on, because actually you're using a deficit language right now. So flip it.
That's what we keep saying, right?
Okay, very nice. Now flip it and model for me what you would do, because I know you do.
So basically, it's doing it together to begin with, exploring it and understanding what they do and don't know about it. So, for example, I've got a child on my other screen right now who was really struggling to know how to just do a book review poster. And, you know, we'd gone through it so many times. She'd been set it for homework. She's done it for other books. But she just basically needed that reassurance throughout to say, I don't feel like what I'm doing is right, and feeling
reassurance.
That
reassurance is a fantastic. Yes, it's the best piece of feedback.
Exactly.
Yes, it's fine. Yes, it's fine. Yes, it's fine.
Exactly. And like that support. So when I have students who are in school and I'm not their primary source of education, we go through their homework that they've been set. We go through how to break it down into steps. We go through and set a goal. Like, I don't like using the SMART acronym, but you know, that sort of approach.
Neither do I. It's just a bit reductive. Let me just share with you. Is it okay if I read from my book? It's my textbook. Powerful feedback. As well-renowned educational researcher, Professor John Hattie has observed, the problem with learning is that it's invisible. Minds are not like a car engine. We can't lift the hood on our students' learning and see the motor whirring. Instead, we can only see its results of learning. Like gravity, learning is intangible, but its results are concrete. Unfortunately, it's not as predictable as gravity. I know that every time I throw a ball, it will fall. I don't know that every time I read new information, I will learn it. That's why there's a growing body of research aimed at understanding what works best in teaching and learning. Do children learn better in ability groupings or mixed groups? Does holding a child down a year affect their development? Does an arts education improve overall outcomes? I'm just going to skip forward a bit. I think of effective feedback using two metaphors. The first is reflective studs or cat's eyes used to signal the lanes on a road. They light up your way in the dark, keep you on track, and move you towards your destination. Not only do these clever little devices show you where you're supposed to be, but when you veer out of lane and accidentally drive over them, you'll feel and hear the bump, bump, bump of the metal studs. They'll continue making that annoying sound until you make a correction and move back to the center of the lane. The second is bumpers in a bowling lane, which stop your ball from dropping into the gutter. No matter how bad your aim, they prevent failure in a way that the reflective studs don't. Think about your use of feedback in supporting different students at different points. When would you be cat's eyes, pointing the way, alerting them to their mistakes, but not intervening? And when should you be bumpers, not allowing them to fail and never letting failure be an option? Jenna, tell us.
Exactly. And I think that I like the bumpers one because I feel like one of the conversations that came up, I think it was last week, I don't know if it was directly in the WhatsApp group or if it ended up veering off into other conversations, was about this idea of, oh, don't bother setting homework, or you're going to have so much stress around homework and stuff. But actually, to me, it's those bowling bumpers. You put those up, you support. If when you meet a child, everything you do has to be from the ground up. You can't just go, okay, right, this kid is this level at school, they're doing their GCSE exams this year, that means we're going to start and we're only going to do past paper practice and learn what we need to along the way. You have to start with those bumpers. You have to build, like, every single student that I have that's doing other things, the reason why it's governessing and not tutoring is because we build a timetable. It's often a visual timetable, even for the teenagers who are used to everything being in writing and no pictures. And we do a homework timetable together, and every single week we look at the homework that is being given before we learn anything new. We look at what they're learning in school before we look at anything new and what we're doing. That core bit gives them that security that they feel like they are managing what they already have on their plate. They're managing their extracurricular activities. And I include, like, I always talk about integration. Tutoring isn't a separate thing in someone's life. It has to integrate, because it's not this whole idea that school is held above everything else and everything else is secondary, or you can't live or have interest or exist until after you finish school, and you can't learn what you need to learn and want to learn until after school. It's so frustrating to me, because all of this should be at the same kind of hierarchical level-ish, Maslow's triangle first, but like it's part of that. And you have to have, I always go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because actually this approach to the bumpers, to the cat's eyes, is part of that. You build a young person up a bit at a time. You give them the support to feel like they're managing their baseline, that they can feel successful, that what you're doing with them isn't taking away time from everything else that they need to be doing and want to be doing and have pressure to be achieving. They need to feel successful. And so many young people, is like, I tend to say that it's especially the high achieving young people, the people that are told they're high achieving, or told that they're intelligent, or told that they have really high potential, are the ones who then always feel like no matter where they're at, no matter how much they're doing and achieving, they always feel like they're not productive enough, they're not achieving enough, they're not successful enough. And yeah, like
that's so powerful. And it's so powerful that you just made that connection there between who we end up as adults and what our experience of feedback was like as children. And I have read somewhere a really depressing study about how teachers' children receive such miserable feedback from, they'll take a birthday card to their mum and they'll get, spelling and grammar corrections in it. And I honestly, I have to sit on both hands and bite my tongue not to do it to my children, which just shows you how easy it is to make those mistakes. My gorgeous 16-year-old, who you guys have heard so much about, has just discovered a love for creative writing, and it's gorgeous. And there is no criticism, no negatives necessary in that journey, right? It's just go and go and go and go, and edits along the way are part of the creative unfolding. But to get there, he needed to feel safe first. Go on, Jenna.
I just had a thought. One of the things that I think I always forget to mention in these conversations, because I have these conversations surprisingly a lot, but also that in general, I mean, I don't know if it's me just being very autistic and therefore very literal in this, but you know how like there's a lot of conversations around like I've come across it on social media and all sorts, where when someone is upset and venting to you or whatever, checking in with them with, do you want solutions? Do you want me to do you want to just listen? It is the same thing for your kid coming to you and saying, I love this creative writing, I'm having fun with it, and saying, before like we have this conversation, can I just check in? Are you showing me to this because you're excited and you want to show
but
it?
the truth is that would already dampen their spirits. The question, which means that
yeah, but doing that first and then going, hey, do you want me, like, what kind of feedback are you looking for here? Do we want to like read it together and you tell me everything you love about it, or like, do you want me to go teacher mode?
Okay, hold on. But there's something about meaning in the feedback. Okay, so Sarah, 9-year-old, lying in bed last night, drawing comics, and she had the characters from Dogman in flowery pajamas, and she hands it to me, and I'm reading, and she hands it to me, and she says, "What do you think?" And I looked at it, and I said, "Oh, I love it." And she said, "I love that you looked first." Right? I'm so happy because, and then she gave me that lovely feedback as well, didn't she? She told me what she liked, so I can do it more next time. Okay,
you cared enough to look.
What's that?
You cared enough to look.
I cared enough to look. That was the feedback. Yeah.
I wish I had had any of that growing up. And
your Dogman comics, I will look.
Dogman comics are brilliant. I actually do love those.
James, go ahead.
I think as well, it's talking about what a couple of points got. Talking about what Jenna was saying. If something else, other things can become a priority. So I always reiterate that to students, I say, if there's other things that are you've got to look, what's your highest priority to do, and you've got to focus your energy on that as well. And you can't, you've got a balancing act. I always tell the students this as well. You can't put all your eggs into maths. You've got to, do the balancing act sort of thing. Depending on the student.
I think what's so powerful about that is that you're remembering purpose always. Where are we going here? What's it all for?
Yeah, it's not just to, I want them to come out. It's not necessarily to get a grade. It's to be able to actually use maths in day-to-day life and get that pass sort of that they need, or that level that they need to go to the next stage. But it's not necessarily for that grade. It's actually, okay, this will give you a platform to go out into the real world, because it's not like exam paper, a lot of the real world.
Right.
That's
interesting, isn't it? The element of reading feedback in the real world, and whether it's the same skills as academic feedback. You see academics growing up to be hapless adults. You know what I mean? Because feedback doesn't work in the same way. Like, you just got run over. Nobody warned you first. You just got run over. That was the feedback.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
And another point that we can't always be on top form all the time. And if the student isn't on top form, we can sort of softly recognize it together and say, I say, you can do better, in a sense, not in as harsh way, I say, but I know you can do. We can do better together, but it's the fact that you're actually doing it, even if you're not. This is what counts more when you're actually not at top form. When you're doing it, then counts for more actually, because it will. I said this will pay you back months down the line. You've
That's
sort
beautiful.
of grinding through
That's
this
beautiful.
this process.
Have you
now.
seen that lovely drawing? I might see if I can find it and share it in the group in a second, of your best today is different to your best tomorrow. And that's completely legitimate. If you're giving it your best, you're giving it your best. That's such a gentle and trustful approach, James, because, you know, there's some days where the child doesn't need feedback about their maths because it was everything they could do to just show up for you.
Yeah, exactly. They just sometimes just turning up and giving it a go, is the best thing. And I said, you know, or if they're tired, they could be tired, they could have had other things going on in their lives.
Yeah.
And
So you've
sometimes
adjusted
I'm
your
like,
expectation.
I purposefully, sometimes if something's a too difficult concept that I've got planned to go through at that time, I'm like, actually, we'll just switch it up and revise some stuff that they can do to build confidence instead. So I'm constantly trying to assess where they're at that moment, because I feel like it's like myself. If you give me something that's really difficult, and I'm really tired and I'm not in the right mindset to take it in, I just feel destroyed and not good enough that I can't learn it. So I try to.
Isn't it amazing that it's, for some reason, feels like such a new idea to reflect on children and their learning in the same way that Jen, I'm going to go to Georgina next, okay? In the same way that our processes work, because, you know, of course children are like us, and of course we're like children, and just like we don't want to be criticized and put on the spot and people picking out what we're doing wrong. Odette doesn't tell me what I'm doing wrong all day, but she jolly well tells me when I do something right, and it works. Georgina, it's a perfect segue, because for the last 4 minutes, I want you to reflect on what that means in an adult context, in a management context, if you're working with other tutors, or in the context that you and I were discussing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really important to take in mind what we said last time as well, where we were saying about, as Jenna's described, this child has got this is a whole human being that we're talking about. The goal that we're talking about is a tiny fraction of that. But then last time we were talking about, we are not responsible for this child's well-being. We're not their parents, but we're still an influence, and we have the potential to make a difference, because what we're doing as tutors is really powerful. I think it's really important to have that in mind, because they are learning skills for whatever small fraction of their lives we get insight into, that they're going to use for the rest of their life. And if they've learned at this point that they're constantly being assessed, they're being compared, they're not good enough, they have to be perfect to be praised, to be rewarded, to be valued, they're going to remember that when they're an adult, and they're going to look for that in the wrong places. And you can teach them now that it's okay to have bad days, that it's okay to ask for help, that it's essential to ask for help, and where to get that help that's actually going to be helpful. Because ultimately, I think society protects you too late. The buffers that exist in society are when you're about to die or go to prison, not when you're having a bad day.
Yes.
Yeah, we could be, we have the power to be brilliant, we have the power to be terrible. I don't think people are in this community because they're terrible. So we're probably already doing the right things.
How lovely, thank you. I just want to share with you that Georgina's just given us all a joyful piece of feedback, right? By being here, you've self-selected yourself to probably be a motivated, caring tutor and lucky students. And what a generous thing to do, and what a generous thing to do for each other. And do you mind my also saying that it came better from Georgina than it did from me? Because in a sense, it's the peer-peer feedback, isn't it? That's the beauty of a group. I'm going to leave you guys to sit with that for a minute. So thank you for participating in this session. As I said, next one will be focusing on online tutoring. And if you want to have a look at the curriculum, it's all there in the calendar for you. Is there anything in particular I wanted to share with you? Just that if you haven't yet written a review for my book, please, 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 I've got to get to 100. I set this my target for myself and that's in my head. Appreciate you guys so much. Thank you, James. Thank you, Jenna. Thanks, Georgina. Thanks, MJ. You guys are the best. Oh, James, you're going to love it. See you guys soon. Bye.
All right.